All right, to keep going with our practice winter card once again, let's finish it up by adding a snow texture. We're going to add a snow texture to your snowy hills, and we're going to add a little icicle frame. So let's head over to Google. It would be a good idea to get this from a stock photo site, so this is high resolution, but I'm going to go ahead and just for practice sake, just get one from Google. Let's go to snow texture. All right, go ahead and choose a texture that appeals to you. And I'm going to get two just to see how it works. There's one that sort of looks like it's flat, and then there's one that looks like they zoomed in from above. Oh, some of them won't even let you have them. Okay, I'm not allowed to have that one. Okay. All right, let's go get that texture you just saved. I'm going to open it up as its own document because it's already sort of low resolution. All right, I'm going to go to File, Open, and search for that. All right, there's my snow texture. I'm going to drag that away. I'm going to get my Move tool, and I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop this snow texture on top of my practice assignment. I'm going to minimize that. I don't need the original one anymore. All right, and I did put that one all the way at the top of my layers palette. I'm going to rename that layer Snow Texture. Okay, it's pretty small, so I'm going to resize it and see how it looks when I make it bigger. And I want it to cover my snowy hill, so I'm going to make it big. Once I hit enter, it still looks pretty good. It's not pixelated too bad, so I'll go ahead and work with that. Okay, so right now it's covering everything. I'm going to move this down on top of my first snowy layer in the layers palette. Okay, so I've got it sort of covering the snow hill in the background, my snow hill number 3. See that? Okay, so I dragged it down and it's right on top of my snow hill number 3. Okay, so right now it's covering it, but what I want to do is clip it. So remember our clipping masks? So I can either right click on the snow texture layer and choose Create Clipping Mask, or we can go up top to Layer, Create Clipping Mask. Okay, so because I put it right on top of that Snow Hill 3 and I created the clipping mask, and see that little drop down arrow saying that this texture is clipped into that hill. All right, so it's only showing up on that hill. I am also going to reduce the opacity of the snow texture layer just so it looks a little more white. It's kind of gray, speckled right now. So I'll go ahead and go to the opacity right here in the layers palette and reduce that opacity a little bit. Bring back a little bit of the white. There we go. All right, now if you really wanted to get interesting, maybe you would want to put a different snow texture on each hill. All right, but I'm going to go ahead and duplicate my snow texture layer. So I'll right click and duplicate layer. Or you could go to layer, duplicate layer, and you can rename it from here. I'll go ahead and just call it snow texture 2 because I'm going to put it on top of the hill number 2. All right, so I'm going to take this layer now, and I'm going to drag it on top of my snow hill 2. All right, now notice it's already covering the snow hill 2, but it's still covering my sky. I need to make another clipping mask. I need to clip it into snow hill 2. All right, so snow texture 2 needs to be clipped into snow hill 2. Layer, create clipping mask. All right, there it is. Now it's already lowered opacity because I had duplicated the layer, so it's the same lowered opacity. All right, one more time, I want to put that in on top of snow hill number 1. So I'm going to duplicate the snow texture again, layer, duplicate layer. I'm going to call it snow texture 1 because it's going to go on top of hill 1. All right, I'm going to drag this up on top of snow hill 1, and I need to make that clipping mask again. Layer, create clipping mask. All right, so now I have my snow texture on all 3 of the hills. If you'd like, you could also add the snow texture to your snowman, but that's your choice. So you could add texture to the snowman, you could add a different texture, a different snow texture to the snowman to make it have a little bit of contrast. Okay, so we added a fun texture. All right, last thing we're going to do is add a frame around the whole card. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to scroll to the very top of my layers palette, and I'm going to make a brand new layer. And I'm going to go ahead and rename this frame. Okay, so I've added a brand new layer. It's on the very top, and I've called it frame. What I'm going to do is make sort of a loose icicle frame around the whole thing using my pen tool. All right, so I'm going to go back and get the pen tool, the regular pen tool. If you want to try out the freeform pen tool, go for it. It lets you just kind of draw freely with the pen tool versus clicking and dragging to make direction handles. I prefer the actual pen tool though. So I'm going to get the pen tool. Let's make sure you're in path mode. We're going to fill it later. So let's choose path for right now. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start sort of, I'm not going to start on the edge because I want the frame to start inside. So I'm going to kind of jump in a little bit. And I'm just going to click to set an anchor. And now I'm going to make just some fun little icicles. Now you can make them pointy, you can make them round, totally up to you. All right, I'm using Alt. Right now I'm using Alt, and I'm changing the direction of my handle. Right now my handle is pointing down. I'm holding Alt, and I'm moving my handle to point up because I'm going to be going up and down. So we're learning to get better at drawing with the pen tool. All right, so I'm just sort of making a little frame that's going to end up being sort of some icicles as if we're looking out at them hanging down. Okay, and remember, you don't have to be perfect the first time. We can go back and edit this. All right, and I'm just going to kind of now, I've got my sort of icicle frame at the top here. I'm going to now jump down and sort of make a loose frame. Okay, now I'm not going to fill it yet because we're going to do something different. But what I am going to do is I'm going to grab my white direct select tool and I'm just going to edit a little bit of this. Remember, you can go back and edit. You don't have to be perfect the first time, because you can use that white direct select arrow, and then you can make it close to perfect. So no reason to have jagged paths, because you can edit with the white direct select arrow. Now notice I'm using that white arrow, and I kind of click on my path to see it and edit. I click away from the path to now look at it without those anchor points and see what I need to go back and change. Okay, now at the moment, I've actually got a path, and if I fill it, it's going to fill the center. But I don't want it to fill the center. I want it to fill outside. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back to the pen tool. I'm going to hover inside the document. I'm going to right click, and instead of filling the path, I'm going to make it a selection. All right, so I use the pen tool to make that little outline. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to say make selection. Okay, and it's going to pop up make selection and feather radius. Just keep it at 0 and click OK. All right, so now notice it's a selection. Once again, I could fill this, but it will fill inside. I want it to fill outside. I'm going to go to select inverse. Okay, now that I've gone to select inverse, take a look. I've got marching ants around the border and marching ants around the icicles. So now where I fill, it's going to be the frame, not the interior. So I'll go ahead and get white as my foreground swatch. I'll get my paint bucket, and I'll simply click to fill the frame. All right, I could leave it like that if I wanted, but I want to do some edits. All right, so I'm going to deselect, and right now, that's really white and kind of stands out a lot. Let's do some playing around with it. Let's try giving it that drop shadow that all of the other snow hills have. I don't know. Maybe we'll like it. Maybe we won't. I'm going to go down and grab. You could copy and paste your settings. Remember, hold Alt and drag up your effects from your other layers. Or maybe you just want to go to layer blending, drop shadow. Okay, so I think that looks good. I think I'm gonna add a little bit of a drop shadow, but I'm not gonna make it so big. Let's reduce the size a little and the distance a little. All right, the other thing I don't want it to be so dark, so I'm gonna change the color. I'm gonna make it more of a gray, not a black. I'm also gonna reduce the opacity. All right, you could play around with the angle of that. Drop shadow on your frame. There we go. I like that. All right, and then I could leave it like this, or I could play around with the color. I could play around with the texture. All right, let's see. Maybe I do want to add that snow texture again. I'm going to go down and duplicate that snow texture again. And I'm going to call it Snow Texture Frame. All right, I'm going to drag that all the way to the top of my layers palette to put it on top of the frame. All right, I'm going to need to make it much bigger, or at least move it. Okay, and now I need to create a clipping mask. I need to clip it only into the frame. Layer, create clipping mask. Okay, so just using some of our previous skills, like the layer style drop shadow and the texture with the clipping mask. There we go. All right, last thing I'm going to do is add a greeting. Okay, so don't forget you can download new fonts. So let's go search for a new font. I'm going to go to dafont.com. Okay, from here you could look for a different font that you think will be fun for your card. I'm going to look at handwritten. And how about this one? Better Yesterday. I'll click on download. All right, my download pops up. I want to save it to my desktop, so I'm going to click desktop and click save. I'm going to minimize this browser. Okay, I'm going to double check when it downloaded if it was in a folder or if it was all by itself. Okay, it's in a folder, so I'm going to double click it and I'm going to look for the font. It needs to be a TTF extension or an OTF. All right, so that's good. I've got the OTF. And I'm going to drag it out of the folder onto my desktop because it makes it easier to find it when I go into Photoshop. All right, so I've dragged it out of the folder. I'm going to double click on it to open up the type, and I'm going to click that button, install. All right, if all went well, you got no pop-ups. If you got a pop-up message that said error, go look for a different font. It didn't work. All right, so that one worked. I'm going to go back to my document, to the type tool. I'm going to drop down my fonts, and I'm going to look for my new font by name. The one I chose was called Better Yesterday. There it is. Okay, now in the type tool, remember you can change some things. So I've got my font. You can change the size. You can change how you type, left justify, center, right justify, and then right here you can change the color of the type. So I'm going to click on that. I don't want white type. All right, I'm just going to choose black for now. We'll see if I want to change it later. Okay, and I'm going to type on the top layer. So make sure you're on the top layer. I'm going to click and release my cursor. I am not going to make a text box. I'm just going to click and release, and now I can type. Okay, that's really small, so I'm going to go ahead and select it. I'm in the type tool still. I'm going to highlight it, and I'm going to make it way bigger. That was 60 points, 72 points. All right, still not very big. Let's make it, can't get an L, how strange. There it is, there's the L, okay. Okay, so from here, I'm going to play around with this. Now, I typed that all in row, so I could leave it like that. Or maybe I want to play around with it stacking. Like maybe I want to do let on top and it right below. Notice I'm typing them on different layers so that I can move them around. All right, so just doing some experimenting, seeing what I like. I would say if I wanted to stack them like this, I don't think this font is all that great. So I like the font when I left them all in a row horizontally. But if I was going to stack them, I think maybe I'd choose a different font. All right, so notice I'm just sort of going from the the move tool back to the type tool. And just selecting each one and changing them. Okay, so now I have two to look at. All right, and notice every time you type, your layer shows you what words are on that layer, and you still have that big T telling you that it's type. It's not pixels, it's type. All right, so I'm on the snow one. Now I can get the it and the let. All right. Okay, so I spent some time playing around with that. I don't think I like the stacked one. I think I like this one better. So I would go ahead and delete those or hide those. Okay, but do play around with where you put your text, what kind of font you use. Is your text horizontal? Is your text vertical? Is your text stacked? All right, make sure you include a snow texture, a snowflake brush, details on your snowman, an icicle frame, and some sort of greeting showing that you downloaded a new font and played around with its placement.